Hey you guys, Irene, Lyon here, and one of the questions I get so often from my clients and people that just meet me and learn about the fact that I work with people's traumas, I help people heal from trauma, I help folks get regulated in their nervous system, which is like the key system that governs all our systems. They ask, how can you do this work? And it's not something that just came overnight. It's something that I have had to build up my own capacity, my own experience, my own training to be able to really witness and hear some very, very disturbing things that we as humans do to other humans, especially our young. And so here's the thing. Obviously, when I'm working with people and I hear some of these horrific stories, I can't break down in front of my clients. I can't. I may shed a tear. Obviously, I empathize with the story, but I don't have to have experienced all these horrific events for me to work with someone. That's not how the work of somatic experiencing works, how the work of helping people regulate their nervous systems after their nervous systems have been dysregulated. The key is coming back to that person's experience in the present moment, back into their sensations, their emotions, or lack thereof. And because I'm also trained to work more at the body level from the Feldenkrais standpoint, I can go in and work with some movement patterns, body postures, injuries that have maybe been lingering for years and years and years. But one of the ways I keep sane is, I would say maybe once every month, I have a pretty good cry. I'll come home, there's usually this tipping point where I hear another story of, a dad that did things that were horrific to their daughters or sons. And I don't just mean sexual abuse and molestation. I mean things like smacking a kid upside their head and telling them that they're no good at something. The other day I heard about someone who, when they were little, were put in front of a goalie net, and the father then started to take slap shots with a hockey stick and ball or puck. I've heard of kids that have been molested over and over by babysitters, and just tactics of verbal and emotional abuse that in many ways we think that many parents think that it's acceptable to try to discipline and smarten kids up with certain things. So I've seen the whole spectrum, but there comes a point in a month where I've heard that one story and it just sort of flips me over the edge. I come home and I kind of go to my husband Seth. I'm like, is there any point? Like, what is the point? Because all these things keep happening. People keep repeating patterns. From that is this big release of tears and sadness and anger. So much anger for the humans that are out there in this world who inflict harm, especially to infants and children and teenagers. So I have to have a good cry. And the first reason is because of these stories. And one of the worst stories I ever heard was when I very first started working at this trauma level. One of my clients, her name is Grace. I write about her. I'll put the link of that article underneath this video. But she was horrifically assaulted sexually by family friends. She was tied to trees and to the beds, and she was forced to also watch her brother endure the same kind of torture and abuse. And, I don't speak this to necessarily trigger anything. It's just the facts. We as humans do a lot of bad stuff to our young. Animals in the wild don't do this kind of shit. They don't, right? They may do a bit of a bum pat or grabbing their cubs by the scruff of the neck to take them away from danger. But they don't do this kind of horrific stuff, and it's because we pass this along generation upon generation. So when I have one of these breakdowns, the thing that brings me back is that these clients are in my office. Many of them are young, my age, 40s, 30s, 20s, and they want to stop the cycle. Many of them either have young kids or they have yet to have children. Many of the female clients I have not had children because they don't want to repeat the cycles that occurred in their family. So they're entering into this work with intelligence and smartness and bravery and strength to actually find their internal power again, because that power got taken away when they were very little. So that's what keeps me going. When someone asks, how can you do this work? I say it is hard, and I have my own moments of breakdown, but then I'm reminded about all the good that is happening in my practice and in my online forums. Now the second reason, so the first reason that I cry hard once a month are these stories. The second comes down to how disconnected people are from their bodies. So true fact is that when we undergo threat, when we undergo some form of helplessness, abuse, again, verbal, sexual, emotional, physical, it can be any kind of threat where it puts a little person under stress and duress, is they disconnect from their body. They no longer feel this vessel. And the reason why is because when we're so little, often we can't fight back. We can't flee, right? Our survival is dependent on these individuals that are harming us. So there's this difficult push-pull that occurs where we have to stay, and in doing so, we completely disconnect from this body space. And then what occurs is we don't treat it well. We don't feed it the right foods. We don't want to get outside and be active in it because it just brings back qualities of discomfort and pain. And because those emotional, verbal, sexual, physical traumas get trapped in the body system, to ask a person to go into those systems means to potentially and usually feel reactions that have been sticking to their system for some people decades. So that, it saddens me because our bodies are actually quite wonderful. They can do really cool things. All you have to do is look up things on YouTube and watch all these feats of physicality and creativity, not just with physical sports and such, but for many acts of creativity, we need our body. We need to feel into our gut to know where to go, where to do, who to connect with. And that leads me to the third reason why I have these good cries maybe once a month. People will come in, usually it's women that I see, so guys, you got to do this work too. But these women come in and they are at a loss because their relationships are so terrible. And it's not because they have gotten into a relationship with the intention of having a crappy relationship. They have just, in a sense, attracted the chaos or the shutdown that they grew up in. So it's all that their nervous system, their radar knows how to find. And so what occurs is that we end up, when we haven't healed our past traumatic experiences that are usually all in relationship. Of course, this is the exception, would be traumas that result from things like car accidents and physical injuries. But for the most part, these early traumas of our environment, being in a family system, being in a school system even, and our friends, that affects how we then seek out our relationships in the future. So people come in and they're at wit's end because the partner that they're with has no interest in their well-being. They see their partner starting to improve and inquire into their emotions and feelings, and then their partner shuts them down or gets usually scared themselves because they don't want to work on their own stuff. And that really pains me because many of these people come in and they have children, they have investment with this person, and yet the person on the other side it's like you can't get through to them, and it is not an easy situation to then take yourself out of that icky, sticky, toxic situation and leave. It's just not that simple. So that's the other reason why I get a little bit sad, is we have this situation where so many people are struggling in relationship, and all you have to do is look out there, and there are so many coaches, relationship coaches, sex coaches, people trying to find love via the internet because they just can't. And one of the main things that we have to really work on if we want to find good relationship is we have to work on ourselves, and we have to work at healing these past traumas that occurred in relationship. Now, the fourth reason I have a good cry every month or so, and this one is really, it really gets to me, that is our inability as humans to raise healthy kids. Now, I'm generalizing here. Of course, I know people that raise really good, healthy kids. My parents did that. Thank you, mom and dad. But my husband didn't. I have friends who didn't. I have friends that are still struggling with how they were raised as children, which then turns it to us to say, okay, if we want to raise healthy kids, we need to work on our own stuff first. So I see it when I'm down at the park, just down from my house here, children that are threatened if they don't smarten up, they're not allowed to play the next day. Kids that are threatened that if they don't eat that on their plate, something bad is going to happen. These are all things that I hear when I'm just around outside in the general public, in my upper white class society here in Vancouver. This isn't just stuff that happens in the slums and in places where there's a lot of poverty and violence. This happens everywhere. This capacity for us as human beings to raise children, I was thinking about this the other day, we're really new at it. Right, we're new at raising babies in an industrialized, technological, and domesticated world. Way back when, in nomadic days, hunter-gatherer style, things were a lot more simple. It was the family in a tribal unit. There weren't a lot of other distractions. Threats were pretty basic. They were the tiger that might come in and eat your babies, so you protected them. Fire, cliffs to fall off of. But now, because we've had enough generations of trauma, war, abuse, that gets stuck in the generational patterns. And transgenerational trauma is a real thing. It has been studied, and we see that it actually our traumas get passed down. The cool thing is that we can go in and shift these patterns. I mentioned a little bit ago that my clients, I love the fact that they're coming in and they're wanting to work on their stuff before they have their own babies. This is such a good sign. But right now, we are really, really unrefined in how we raise our children, and we have to start having bigger conversations about what is right, what is wrong. That old adage of allowing your babies to cry themselves to sleep, I was brought up in that generation, and I have friends, I remember when I was in my 20s, would let their child, their infant, cry themselves to sleep. And it pained me to hear it. And at that point, mums and dads, they didn't know. They were just told that that's what you do to help a child learn how to regulate. But in that instance, to give you a little tip, when a baby is forced to cry itself to sleep, it falls asleep out of pure exhaustion. It's not because it's soothing itself in a nice way. It gets to a point where it's so overwhelmed that it just shuts down. This is the freeze response of the fight, flight, freeze. So when it's crying, it's in that distress, fight, flight energy, and then it hits a point where it can't handle it anymore, and then it goes out. It's the same reason someone who is being physically attacked might be trying to fight, and then all of a sudden they go limp because they realize they can't fight anymore. They give up. So what happens with those babies that are let to cry themselves to sleep, they don't learn how to self-soothe. And we learn how to self-soothe as infants via co-regulating with our primary caregiver. Our mama, our papa, our nanny has got to teach us how to bring our heart rate down. When a baby is born, they don't have that capacity to do that. They don't. We have to teach them. And then here's the clincher, is that many moms and dads, they themselves don't know how to bring their own heart rates down naturally. We use all sorts of things to bring ourselves down. I'll talk about more of this in other vlogs. But bottom line is we are so unrefined at raising our young, and we got to change it. We have to change it for the future to be a little rosier. And that leads me to the fifth reason why once a month I have a good cry, and it comes down to our world and our global unit, our global community. One of my mentors, Peter Levine, the founder of Somatic Experiencing, he said one day at one of our trainings, he believes that true human enlightenment will only happen when all human beings on this planet have a regulated nervous system. That means, if I go back to that baby example I just gave you, that all babies eventually are taught how to self-soothe and regulate via an adult that has their own self-soothing mechanisms in place. We're not at a point right now where that is true. Most of us, many of us in Western populations, first world, second world, not so much third world. When we have a simpler world system, there tends to be more tribal units. It's not as complex. But first and second world, many of us, most of us are living in fight, flight, and freeze dissociation. This is why we need so many drugs for antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, right? So we're at this real interesting stage in our evolution as humans where we need to actually really get into these deep layers of nervous system healing. I am an environmentalist by heart, but not the kind that goes and pins myself to trees and protects the oceans. I'm interested in human health, in human potential, in human capacity, and realizing that it's us humans that have harmed our planet. The planet isn't harming itself, we are. We're the ones that torture animals, that torture other human beings, that torture the rainforests and the oceans and all of this stuff. Which means that for us to get healthier as a global community, we need to get into these fight, flight, freeze patterns. I know I repeat this over and over in these videos, but it's the truth. The more I work with my clients, the more they see that connection, the more they connect with babies and see the life in these children and that they need different kinds of care, the more my clients get into their bodies and heal their traumas, they get more connected to their bodies, their relationships improve, or they leave the ones that are toxic. So that's what I have to say today in this video, why I have a good cry every month or so. And I think it's important that I do that, because if I didn't, I wouldn't stay human to the situations that are going on. I have to empathize with the pain and the suffering that's happening. I have to do my own grieving, feel my own sadness. And then in doing that, I tip the scale back. And then I look at the bigger picture and I'm like, we can do this. But we have to start looking at these deeper elements. If we don't, we're just going to pretend everything is fine, take deep cleansing breaths, and go on meditating and practicing all these things that we're doing in our self-help community, but we're ignoring these underlying problems that are at the root level of our physiology. We cannot deny it anymore. We got to work on this stuff. So if you are new to me, or if you have not signed up for my email updates, if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel and all the videos there, head over to one of those places, either my website, my YouTube channel, sign up for my updates, subscribe to the videos, send me a comment. Let me know what you think of these elements that I just talked about. I would love to hear from you and start up a conversation. Until next time, take very good care.